Kevin Gordon here from AutoSavant.com with your January 24th edition of the afternoon commute. Today will be the last day, sadly, that will be coming to you from this glorious Hyundai Accent. Goes back to Hyundai tomorrow, and I think the middle of the week next week we'll be coming to you live from the Hyundai Veloster, which we're interested to test. Today I've got 3 or 4 things to talk through, starting with the Nissan Juke R. So if you haven't seen what this thing is, a bunch of the, I believe the British call them boffins, over in Nissan Europe, took a Nissan Juke body and fundamentally stuffed the underpinnings of a Nissan GTR into it. And to do that, of course, it had a whole new floor, the firewall moved. I mean, in some ways, it's a shortened wheelbase version of a GTR with a Juke body sitting on top of it. Now, this thing's been around for a while. The YouTube series of videos going through its building happened over the last month or so. And the reason I'm talking about it today is the damn thing's still in the media. You know, I heard that when Nissan Europe originally commissioned, the RML Group was the company that did it. The RML Group to go build this thing, Nissan Corporate in Japan was a little pissed about the whole thing. Well, I'm sure looking back on it now, the folks over at Nissan Corporate are no longer all that upset about the fact they decided to go through this thing, because it just won't go away from the automotive coverage. To me, it's a gimmick. Great, they stuffed a bunch of, a twin turbo all-wheel drive system into a small, into a small crossover. Great, good for them. So now, of course, what they've done is they've taken them to where else? To Dubai, because where else are you going to take something as ridiculous as a 520 horsepower all-wheel drive Nissan Juke to Dubai? And they let a bunch of the press drive it. They built 2 of them. They built a left and a right-hand drive one, and everybody's been driving them. And it seems to be just an exercise to allow automotive journalists to get out their thesauruses and see how many interesting adjectives they can come up with about driving an all-wheel drive SUV. Good for them. Next up on the list, the Camaro ZL1. The new Camaro that's going to have the CTSV ZR1, I believe it's LS9 supercharged 5.5 liter V8 from Chevrolet. The reason why this caught a bunch of media attention was the chief engineer from Chevy at a press launch event started getting a little loose in the lips and talking about the fact that he believed that the ZL1 will be faster, without a doubt, than the GT500, going to the point that they released their lap times around the Nürburgring, and Ford, despite taking the GT500 to the Nürburgring, decided to never release their lap times. I'd like to advise all of you chief engineers out there, let the cars do the talking. When people get these cars head to head, let it be decided then which one's faster. Until then, all you come across as is boastful, and potentially you're lining yourself up to look moronic. These 2 cars are actually reasonably different things, despite the fact that, they're both pony cars, they're both muscle cars, and they're in the wars. They have large displacement supercharged engines, right? Sound all similar. But the Camaro's going to quite a bit of black magic to get to where it is. It's using magnetic ride in its suspension. It's got all the cooling and everything all set up. The GT500 is just sort of putting a big honking aluminum blocked supercharged engine and cranking out 650 horsepower. I'm, of course, very, very interested to drive both of them. I, which you'll probably come to learn, am not the largest fan of the modern Camaro. I think it's chintzy. The interior is terrible as far as I'm concerned. You know, the belt line is somewhere around here when you drive one. It's got that awful piece of plastic that goes around it. The gauges don't make any sense. The steering wheel, if you ever looked at the steering wheel in a modern Camaro, I swear that the pivot point is in the middle. It's got that big weird wheel on top. Anyway, so no amount of suede and Alcantara they can shove into one with magnetic ride is going to make it a car that I'm going to love. But I'm sure it's going to be fast. Which one's going to be faster and in which categories, in, you know, my guess ultimately comes down to type of track and driver. And I think that they'll start to split across the boards as to which is which. We shall see. Next up on the list, Car and Driver today released the results of their most recent lightning lap. If you're not familiar with the lightning lap, what they do is they take a variety of cars in different classes and they take them down to Virginia International Raceway in, of course, Virginia. And they drive them around one of their longer courses down there to see which one's the fastest. And fundamentally what they typically seem to do is they take like a trucks class and then they break them up by price. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I mean, Car and Driver deserves the credit for this. It's not an easy thing to do. It's an enormous amount of work. And, you know, let's face it, the magazines these days are having a tougher and tougher time. So go out and buy one. Support auto writing in its highest level, I suppose, at this point. A few conclusions to come away with, though, without spoiling all the results. One, if you'll remember, 2 years ago or so, I had the chance to drive the BMW X5M around the road course at Pocono Raceway. And I had gotten out my thesaurus that day and pulled out all of my sort of stops to try to explain what it was like to drive that thing. And I realized today that I finally figured out how to explain it. If you've ever heard Michio Kaku speak about time, and he talks about how time is a river and it can flow around and bubble, and it's the concept that there's multiple realities and that time is not a fixed thing, it's bendable, so on and so forth. Well, somehow what BMW's done is the exact same thing for physics. That X5M, for being as big and as tall as it is mind-bending, and that's, without giving too much away, what Car and Driver seemed to find out as they drove it. Next up is the class of cars under $30,000. And you started to spoil the surprise. Nothing new came out this year that's faster than the V6 Mustang that they tested last year. That V6 Mustang was fast. I mean, the track last year was grippier than it was this year, but still, that thing was fast. Other surprising find, this year's Dodge Challenger has really stepped up its game. And you can look into the magazine to see how and how much. And finally, and the thing probably nearest and dearest to my heart, they tested the Boss 302 Laguna Seca edition of the Mustang. And it's fast. Read in the magazine how fast it is. It's fast. And it's going to be interesting to see if in the Camaro ZL1 debate, if they really picked the right Mustang to pick on in the press. Yeah, sure, they went after the GT500, but maybe it's actually the Boss that they should start talking about, which is faster around a twisty road course. That's most of what I had for today. I did want to finish up, because it's gotten an enormous amount of coverage, talking a little bit about driving in the snow, because Jalopnik has done a good job of posting a bunch of videos starting in Seattle and now up in Utah about people sliding around in the snow. If you're going to drive in the snow, either, have a car that's equipped to do so properly, and I would really recommend having snow tires. Our own Kevin Miller, who lives out in Seattle, was smart enough to outfit his cars with a very nice set of snow tires from the tire rack. They shipped them all to him, all set up. put them on his car, it's good to go for the winter. It would really prevent a lot of these problems. Beyond that, stay home. So there you go. It's your afternoon commute for today, January 24th. I'm Kevin Gordon from AutoSavant.com, and I look forward to talking to you soon.